I'm gonna go talk to my applied statistics teacher and, try to teach her how to put this book in.
Okay. I'd be happy to. I'm not sure how much good it will do, but I'd be happy.
I'm just news to you, or like, and if not, you're like, okay, class is started.
Yeah, or I'm just gonna sit here in that awkward stare while you all roll the bucket.
Don't take away my bucket.
Very popular.
He's suspended. I'll have to ask my friend Rachel. Was it in her class? Rachel?
Rachel is currently one of my AFP.
Yeah, was it in her class that got suspended?
She's the Monday, Wednesday evening, and one of the violations was occurring in that class, but it had nothing to do with Rachel.
You didn't have to kick her ass.
You did not need to kick her ass. Just tell her to study.
I know, but she's smarter than that. So there was her. But I have to make sure that one.
Right, she should know better. She's an EMT anyway, right?
Yeah.
So she
Because
better know
we
better.
took EMT class together.
Did you? Yeah, I hold you all to a slightly higher standard. You've already worked in healthcare. Well, really impressive turnout. I'm inclined to just tell you all to bolt, but you've come here. So let's just do something quick and then go. And the something that I'm going to do again Thursday, because it's the hardest thing in this unit. And you all may take notes if you want, or you can look in I am on the final page. I just figured, since it's only about half of us here, that I would do this, and I hope I've edited this handout right. Did anybody check to see if that's the right figure? And if not, does anybody have the updated version of the book here? All right. Is that now, all I want, because you've got the 5th edition, right? All I want to know is to make sure it's not figure 713 in the 5th edition.
What chapter are you on?
It's 7, chapter 7, and it's about halfway through. There's a big diagram. And if you find figure 7.13 and just show it to me, I'll know right out of the gate. It might be the same number in the old textbook too.
7.13?
7.13. 7-13.
So, okay.
You're getting close? Good, it's not. So that's the 5th edition. So I must have edited this in the 6th edition. I would urge you all, in your book, it's 7.14. It's going to be the next. Just so you know which one to look at. It is not 714.
Take pictures out, that was the change in the addition.
They're like, no, you don't need this one.
I will find, we'll get this clear up. Okay, for those of you who are here, I just want your time here to be of some value, and then we'll turn around and go. I want you all to be really, really careful going home. I think it's going to keep snowing for a while, for a few hours. So what I've turned to our figure 7-13 notes. There's a picture in your book. I'm going to try to emulate it. And if you miss details from this story, don't worry. We're going to do the whole thing again Thursday night after we blaze through a few pages of this handout. But the first thing I typically draw, this is the story of how the bridge cell, the macrophage, bridges non-specific immunity with specific immunity. I think I ended our last session by telling you about the macrophage and I said something about it being really important because it's the one that bridges our second and third line of defenses. Here's a macrophage. I typically abbreviate it like this. You are going to learn that cells in your body have little proteins, two different kinds. So I've made one, here, let me draw this one more circular. One is a very circular one, the other one looks like a triangle or a V. Okay? I'm only drawing them that way so you know they're different. Let's put a Roman numeral 1 by this and a Roman numeral 2 by this. Okay, again, everything I cover tonight we will go through again Thursday. So there may be some details you miss here, and I'm doing this in a little different order than I'm used to. These proteins are called major histocompatibility complex proteins, or MHC. And you see I've got an MHC1 and I've got an MHC2. An MHC1 and an MHC2. Okay, what these are proteins that cells in your body, when they have bad stuff or suspicious stuff or non-self stuff inside them, then what they can do is take pieces of that stuff and show it to your white cells on these receptors, if they have them. MHC1 receptors are found on all nucleated cells. So your skin cells have them, your lung cells have them, do macrophages have them? Hint, here's a nucleus. Do macrophages have, okay. MHC1 are on all of your nucleated cells. In fact, it would be easier to simply say which cell doesn't have them. Which mature cell does not have a nucleus? Red blood cells. Good. Red blood cells. Those are the only ones that don't have these. So if I'm a skin cell and I get infected by a virus and that virus dies in me rather than kills me, that could happen too. But if the virus dies in me, a skin cell, I have one of these MHC1 things that I can put a piece of that virus out, show it to a lymphocyte, and tell that lymphocyte, this was in me, just thought you should know about it. And if that's a troublesome thing to that lymphocyte, I will mount an attack against every cell that has that virus in it. MHC1 proteins are on all nucleated cells, and they are recognized by a population of T cells called CD8 T cells. CD8 T cells. MHC2 proteins, or receptors, are only found on B cells and macrophages. So what does that tell you about B cells and macrophages and the MHC receptors that they have?
CD4 cells, T cells.
Hold on, you're skipping to the next step. Good. You're right. But what can you tell? If I ask you what MHC proteins does a B cell have, what would you tell me? Would you tell me MHC2? I wrote it there.
Yeah.
Okay, and MHC1, because all nucleated cells, these cells have nuclei. So these two particular cells have both. They're the only ones in your body that have both. Get that straight, or you will misread some of the questions on the next exam. MHC1 is on all nucleated cells and is recognized by CD8 T cells. MHC2 proteins are on your B cells and macrophages only, and they are recognized, James, by?
CD4.
Good. CD4 T cells. For those of you who have met T cells before, CD8 T cells are also known as cytotoxic T cells. That's a fancy way of saying killer. They kill stuff, and they kill cells by poking holes in those cells. Poke, 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 poke. How would you like somebody to come up and poke a bunch of holes in you? Wouldn't work out too good, would it? They kill stuff. But the other T cell population, these are helper T cells. They don't kill anything directly. They just tell somebody else to do their killing for them. I don't kill people. I pay people to kill for me, kind of thing, is what the helper T cells are. Okay. Many of you may have heard the 2418, who do we appreciate? T cells, T cells, T cells chant from microbiology. That refers to this. 2418, who do we appreciate? That's just to make it a ditty. But that little mnemonic is to remind you MHC2 is recognized by CD4 T cells. MHC1 is recognized by CD8 T cells. The MHC proteins, by the way, when we try to match organs, like if I need a kidney donation, can they just slap anybody's kidney in me? Mm-hmm. Are they going to maybe get a list of people and check their blood and see whose immune system is most compatible with mine so my immune system won't hate that kidney? Mm-hmm. They are checking these. They're checking the genes that code for these. Because if my proteins like this are similar to somebody, then my immune system is probably similar to somebody. You'll see in your handout, these are coded for by HLA genes, and that's what we're trying to do. HLA matching is seeing who is compatible with organ transplant. Now, to do this story, I got to erase this. Everybody cool if I do that? So remember, you're going to get another coat of paint on this. This is a very involved story. Since you all are here, I'm giving you a little preview, and this will help. Macrophage just ate something. Get in my belly. Because that's what macrophages do. They eat stuff that isn't supposed to be there. And it took a piece of it and put it right there. That's what it is. Like chews it into little pieces and then goes, and then it just holds it out. It holds it out. It's savage. Savage, you know, in like cell language. Savage. Who's going to recognize this? CD8 T cell. Good. That's a whole other story. Because when the CD8 T cell recognizes this, it will either say, I don't care about that. Why did you call me? Or it will say, I'm going to kill everything in the body that has that on it. It's either on or off. Okay, it's up to the CD8 T cell. If this worries that CD8 T cell, it'll kill everything that has this antigen on it. If it doesn't worry it, it will swim away and say, don't bother me until you got a real game. Okay? But who's going to recognize this? Here's another piece. Spit it out onto an MHC2. Who needs to recognize that? CD4 T cell. And this is the story we're talking about on the last page. Our 7-13 figure is the story of how the macrophage puts a piece of this onto an MHC2 receptor. This is how about half of your immune system works. I'm not going to do this if I get a splinter. Even if let's say I get a splinter, and I just leave it. My body will take care of it. And then it gets infected, and red, and tender, and what's that word? Pussy. Okay? This still won't happen. Because what I got to do is just clean that up. There's no mystery about how to kill a splinter. It's just about me, a little hygiene, maybe taking that splinter out, cleaning it up with a little peroxide or something. This is for stuff like viruses and cancer cells. When you have cancer, your immune system knows it first, mounts an attack against it. But a lot of cancer wins the battle over your immune system, and that's why cancer is so bad. But when I have my first cancer cell, my immune system would see that cell, if it could access it, and say, you don't look like you belong here. Who are you? You mutant freak? And my immune system is allowed to call people names like that. There's no real political correctness in the immune system. It's just either you're good or I'm going to chew your face off, kind of thing. Okay, so this is when it's complicated stuff like viruses and cancers and some bacteria would cause this kind of an attack to be mounted. Right? So the macrophage eats pieces, shows it all off on its MHC1 and MHC2 receptors. If a CD4 T cell, CD4, and I'm calling this one in the first one, let's just read through this together. This is basically the story how one, the macrophage bridges the two lines of defense, second and third, and how two, a generic yet very specific CD4 T cell responds. Specificity, are you all okay with that concept? Like, here's what specificity means. I just had a bad day. I got infected by hepatitis A virus, hepatitis B virus, and hepatitis C virus. That's a bad day. That's a tough day. You know, just go home, get a good night's sleep, and probably ought to go to the doctor tomorrow. Change that lifestyle. No, let's not go there. Let's not go there tonight.
We need to talk.
What I have to have if I want to fight all of these viruses, I don't have one big giant T cell who says, I kill them all. I would be bad. I'm trying to talk like Schwarzenegger, and I'm probably dating myself, and it wasn't a very good imitation. What I need if I want to fight these viruses I just got myself exposed to, I need one T cell that's specific for that virus and will disregard these two. Even if there's zillions of them in me, this T cell's, I don't know, I just do this. So that I need another T cell that's specific for hepatitis B virus, which will ignore these two. And I need a third line of T cells that will attack that. I'm going to have a busy 3 lines of T cells, but I need all 3 of them to get active if I want all 3 viruses killed. That's what specificity is. A particular lymphocyte line is specific for only one piece of a virus or one particular antigen. So when this macrophage puts this antigen out, a bunch of CD4 T cells may just walk right by. That's not mine. That's not mine. I'm not specific for that. Why are you looking at me? But then all of a sudden, the one that is specific for that says, I think that's me. Oh my God, I think I'm supposed to do some stuff. That's the T cell that reacts. And the T cell has a receptor for that to make sure that's the antigen I'm supposed to react with. This T cell, and I'm on to presentation. This T cell comes up to the macrophage. In this case, I'm calling the macrophage the antigen presenting cell because it's the one with the piece of antigen on its MHC protein. Presents it on the MHC2 to what we call a generic CD4 T cell, also known as a helper cell. This generic T helper cell is simply designated TH. It really hasn't even started school yet. Just a kid. Very generic. But the minute this cell recognizes its antigen for the first time, it's like, oh my God, this is my first game. Or my first day at work. I matter. All of a sudden I matter. The minute it recognizes this cell now becomes a THP cell. That's for precursor. Okay? I sometimes do this. It was a TH generic cell first, and once it recognized antigen, it now becomes a TH precursor cell. Okay, if you want to kind of do a process here. That TH precursor cell, once it recognizes its antigen, gets activated. And it gets activated by this. IL-1, or interleukin 1. It's a special little protein secreted by the macrophage. And what it does is it activates this cell. Once this cell is activated, turned on or stimulated to react is another way to think about it. This cell now showers itself with interleukin 2. So it is activated by interleukin 1 coming out of the macrophage, and then its response is to shower itself. It shoots out IL-2 onto itself. What this step does is it makes this cell do mitosis, which means I'm going to have tons and tons and tons of cells like this that are all specific for the same antigen. I'm basically going from one soldier to tens of thousands of soldiers. Okay, the IL-1 out of the macrophage activates it. The IL-2 out of itself causes it to proliferate. I think that's the word I'm using in your handout, proliferate. Let's read that activation and proliferation slowly. During presentation, the antigen-presenting cell secretes IL-1 to activate the helper cell. Oh, you all are going to love this. I did, it's little, but it's a mistake. Who used pen? Awesome.
Always.
Well, this is supposed to go here. This step, my mistake. Let's groan together. Oh man, it's snowing. I've said this to my classes before. You know what? When teachers used to do that to me, I always used a pen. I gave them the dirtiest frickin' look when they turned around. So, get it out of your system. My mistake. This IL-1 activates the generic cell, which immediately turns it into this Th precursor cell, who showers itself with IL-2 to make itself many, many, many Th precursor cells. And I believe, now that I've read through that paragraph, that's exactly what that's saying. That process, that step with IL-2 is called cloning or clonal proliferation. I don't want all my T cells to be doing mitosis. I only want the one line of T cells who's specific for this antigen. I don't have other antigens in me right now. I just got this one. So the ones that are specific for it are the ones that need to fill my lymph nodes. And you know what? When this happens in a lymph node, that's why you can start feeling lymph nodes. There's zillions of lymphocytes in there fighting against something. So now, this, just very quick before we finish this story, interleukins are secreted by a lot of your immune cells, and they're kind of little proteins and communication modulators that help your first line, your second line, and your third line of defense kind of communicate and always do the right thing. Some turn white cells off, some turn white cells on. There's a long list. We're going to learn about them on Thursday. But right now, I want you to simply understand that this cell needs to decide. The helper T cell is the most important. Boy, this is tough, but it's probably true. The helper T cell is, of all of your white cells, probably the most important. Because when it comes to an antigen presented on an MHC2 by a macrophage, it's up to this cell to decide how the body is going to kill it. So right here, it's cloning itself. It's got a lot of soldiers, and it's going like this. How shall I kill this antigen and everything that has this antigen on it? And it is very, very open to other cells' advice, like that program, what was it, Regis Philbin, to become a millionaire? Okay, who wants to be a millionaire? I probably could have come up with that. And there was ask the audience. Could you, like, if you didn't know the answers, you could ask the audience, and yeah, you had these little tricks you could do to help you out. Well, the ask the audience, they'd say, well, if you don't know the answer, you want to ask the audience, and then the audience would say what they think, and if it's like 90% for one of the answers, you're going to go with them, right? You're listening. What do you think? What do you think? That's kind of what the THP cell is going to do here. In our response, as the THP cell is proliferating, it has to decide which branch of the immune system. There are 3 of them. Cell-mediated immunity is T cell killers. Humoral immunity is B cell killers. What do B cells use to help kill stuff? What do they make? Begins with an A. Antibodies. I think I heard a couple of you say antibodies. That's humoral. And what's inflammation? Is that specific? Inflammation? Inflammation is what we call the cells of your second line, the neutrophils, the eosinophils, the monocytes. Very non-specific. But it's up to this cell to decide which of those we do. There's one other choice this cell could make. This cell could say, oh my gosh, it's a false alarm. There's nothing wrong with this antigen. Nobody needs to be killing it. So that would be to just turn everything off. And those are the 4 possibilities here. So what this THP cell is doing is it is listening for other interleukins. Because interleukins is how the audience gives you what they think you should do. And if it listens and it notices there's a lot of, I'm going to try to do these in the order of the paragraph. If it notices a lot of IL-12, it's listening and it says, I'm noticing a lot of IL-12 coming from all the other white cells in the area. It will turn itself into what's called a Th1 cell and turn on cell-mediated immunity. Because that will be the best way to kill this antigen. Cell-mediated immunity is CD8 T cells. A lot of this language will come clear as we go through this in order on the handout on Thursday. On the other hand, this cell listening, rather than noticing a bunch of IL-12, it notices a bunch of, I think IL-4 is the second one. Now this is the predominant one it notices. Remember, we're asking the audience. The first time the audience said IL-12, so it went down this line. But if you ask the audience, the other white cells in the area, and you hear more IL-4, you become a Th2 cell, and that turns on humoral immunity. That's B cells, because they'll kill this antigen better than anything else. A third option is that as this cell listens to the audience of other white cells in the neighborhood, notices predominantly IL-6. Don't ask me about this next step and why. It turns itself into a Th17 cell. So what happened to 3 through 16? 1, 2, 17. I don't know. I don't know. I wasn't invited to that meeting. And a Th17 cell will turn on inflammation. It'll basically say, the non-specific cells take care of this, no problem. We don't need to bother the B cells and the other T cells. The final possibility here is this. That when this cell decides to listen to what everybody else is saying, all it hears is IL-2. So who's the only one talking? Yeah, it's shooting out this IL-2. So, am I the only one? Nobody else has a problem with this? So it now will, in that case, it will turn into a Th regulator cell, and that turns everything off. No response needed. What cells are infected by the HIV virus? T cells, which ones? Yeah, the CD4, the T helper cells. This is why AIDS is such a devastating disease. There are diseases of T cells. Thymic dysplasia is one of them. The school for T cells never developed, so you don't really have mature T cells. And yes, you can actually die from some weird infections in that disease. But in this case, you don't have helper T cells. You now are turning off part of your non-helper T cells. You're turning off part of your B cell response, turning off part of your inflammation response. Does that sound like that might set you up for some infections that a healthy person wouldn't be susceptible to? So this is a really important, I call it a triage cell for the immune system. It doesn't do any killing on its own, but it sure directs what pathway we go on to eventually kill the antigens that it is really, really specific for. Antigen antibody, get that down. And if you all want to get a little bit ahead for seeing this again, the bottom of page 1 of the handout starts your third line. And a lot of these terms I've been using in this discussion: humoral, which is B cells, cell-mediated, which is T cells. Those are your two families of lymphocytes. First thing to remember, these are white cells, so where are they all made? Bone marrow. They are lymphocytes, so what can you tell me about all of them? What feature do they all share? Begins with an S and ends with specificity. Specificity. That's really important to know about lymphocytes. And then I start to kind of separate your cytotoxic T cells from your helper T cells with some numbers and alternative names and aliases and whatnot. As you learn that, this story becomes a little more manageable. So between now and Thursday, if you have time, maybe look at this end of page 1 and on to page 2. And then look at this. Do not memorize cytokines yet. I'm going to ask you all to know most of the cytokines from that list, all the ILs. I'm going to ask you to know most of them. But by the time you get this story, let me just give you an example. The list is on page 2. What do I want you to know about IL-2? Read it, somebody. Excellent. Released by T helper cells. Thanks. You could have done it too. Released by T helper cells to stimulate the proliferation of more T helper cells. That's a very wordy sentence, but look. Isn't that what's happening? It's shooting out IL-2 on itself, that's T helper cell, to create the proliferation of more T helper cells. So some of these cytokines you're going to see in this story, and you'll just learn them that way. Then we'll kind of pick a couple more on the list for you all to know for the exam. I don't really want you spending tons of time memorizing that stuff, but these cytokines, they are really, really important immune modulators. They're not cells, they're proteins and sugars and stuff. They're really, really important. Would you all like to go? Are you going to be mad if I'll go on all night, but I want you all to get home and get safe. Is that all right? Or do you want to keep going?
That's cool.
Go. Be careful. Be careful driving. Go slow. I heard someone telling me 40 miles an hour on 254. Fine. As long as you're not in front of me, that's fine. See you all Thursday. Hopefully it's a little better out, and nice work showing up. We're going to drop a couple points in the bucket on your all's behalf. No, it's too bad you all don't have separate buckets, right?